hello and welcome to the JTC 27 webinar series. It's hosted by the WMIA-WMMA Joint Technology Committee. And with me today are Mark Hessling of Acmos and Jeff Onsrud of CR Onsrud. I do want to also point out that there were quite a few members of the committee that helped out with the creation of all these slides, throwing ideas back and forth, etc. So thanks to the whole committee for getting this all together. And before we begin, I'd like to gauge the level of comfort of the audience with the following terms: machine learning, large language models, and natural language processing. So if you could join us at slido.com with the number that's right below there, 4128275, or you could scan that QR code and just input your response to this. Are you sure what those terms are? Have you heard of them before? Are you comfortable talking about them? Or would you even consider yourself to be an expert at one or all of those kinds of terminologies? And we're just trying to get an idea before we begin of how we should present this to the whole group. Now, I will mention that this is, of course, a bit of a higher level overview, but we're going to go in depth with some of the large language model stuff and provide a demo of ChatGPT and Bard, and we'll also go over some other business use cases and applications of AI and woodworking. All right, so with 11 or 12 people so far that have answered, it looks like most folks are putting themselves on the beginner stages of understanding what those terms are and how they can apply those in their business. And no one actually considers themselves to be an expert. I think even on our side of things, as far as the Joint Tech Committee, that we wouldn't consider ourselves to be super experts in the field, but we're certainly comfortable about talking about these, demoing them for you, and having a conversation about how they can be used going forward. So thanks for your participation there. The JTC is comprised of members from both associations. And for those of you who may not be a member of the WMIA or WMMA, you can join and find out more about those associations by contacting Jacob or Nikki, representatives from those associations, or going to WMIA.org or WMMA.org to find out more info. You do have to be a member of one of the associations to join the Tech Committee, but we're accepting new members, and we would be more than happy to see some new faces in our monthly meetings. So if you're interested, please do visit one of those links you see down below. You can get there from the association websites. Today's presentation is on harnessing the power of artificial intelligence, and we're going to go over a number of topics. First, trying to understand AI and some of those terms, applications of AI in manufacturing. We'll go over kind of comprehensively what large language models are out there right now, what you can do with them, including a demo, some other business use cases, and then get into specifics on what privacy and data concerns or security issues there may be by using some of these new technologies. And lastly, we'll have a Q&A. And if there's any questions that you have, please insert those questions into the Q&A window within Zoom, and we'll try to get to you as soon as possible. So with that, I'll hand it over to Mark Hessling to start helping us understand all about AI in its current form.
Thank you, David. So AI is in the news more and more these days, right? There's a lot of development and innovation taking place by both big familiar companies like Google and Meta, but also by a seemingly multiplying number of startups. But what is AI? Artificial intelligence is really when a machine is able to perceive, to reason, and to learn, when it is engaging in problem solving or even exercising creativity. Apple's Siri and Amazon's Alexa virtual assistants are both based on AI technology. So let's take a closer look at two types of AI and what makes them different and maybe useful for in your business. So first, let's take a look at machine learning and deep learning. So this is when an algorithm detects patterns and consequently learns how to make predictions and recommendations. It does this by processing data and experiences rather than by doing it based on specific instructions by an operator. So you can imagine applications in areas such as logistics, where an algorithm can process tremendous amounts of data in seconds. And in this example, recommend and optimize routes, improving fuel efficiency and delivery times as well. Another example of AI is generative AI, and this uses a different model, one that generates content based on a prompt. So ChatGPT and Bard are examples of generative AI tools. In a matter of seconds, these tools can create credible marketing material, for instance, potentially saving a marketing manager hours of writing copy, editing images, and all the other sometimes tedious tasks that we have to engage in. And I'll stress the need to review the output at this point. One way to look at this maybe is that it's like having a digital intern, right? They can save you a lot of time, but you still need to manage and challenge the output. So let's take a look at the next slide. So based on some studies that McKinsey and Company did, they found that most opportunities for AI are actually in improving existing analytics, learning from the data available in the company, for instance, and then predicting and recommending next steps. Companies that are able to apply AI successfully may thus be able to focus human resources more efficiently, for instance, in business development or product development, focusing on generating more value for their shareholders and more meaningful relationships with their customers. So let's take it one step further and see AI in action, right? So in this case, Scott asked ChatGPT to come up with 10 examples of how AI is used in manufacturing, and very quickly the tool returned this result. So I won't go through the detail here, but I'll turn it over to David again, who will explore how this works with more examples.
Thank you, Mark. So let's talk about a couple of those acronyms, specifically LLM and NLP, what they mean. We'll start with large language models. So large language models are software that comprehends and produces a language that's just like human speech. And they're trained on this extensive corpus of text that we'll talk about throughout the presentation. And these kinds of models are very adept at responding to queries or crafting narratives, whether it's for marketing or editorial content needs, engaging in dialogues, which could be used for things like chat bots and messenger tools. And that positions it as a valuable tool for anything ranging from research to everyday communication. Now, an NLP, or natural language processing, this refers to a technology that empowers computers to grasp and employ human speech. And it allows for tasks like language translation and to be able to engage in dialogue. So really what it is sort of a magical switch that allows computers to be able to have a dialogue that before you could always determine that it was a computer. And now they're actually able to confer back and forth within a conversation just as though they were human. These actual applications and examples of LLMs that are currently in use, ChatGPT is one of them. Those are powered by GPT-3 and GPT-4, which are the large language models that OpenAI uses. There's a model called Palm 2, which powers Google Bard, Llama 2, which powers Meta AI. And I don't want to just limit it to these three, because as we've talked about in the tech committee, for example, there are new models that are coming out every week. And the way this landscape is developing is very difficult to predict. So I encourage you all to go out and look at all these different kinds of models that are out there. And each one is better at certain types of tasks, as we'll get into in a little bit here. I have prepared a bit of a demo. And so I'm going to get into that. All right, so here we are within the Chat GPT interface. And at the top, you can see the GPT.
Hey, David,
Yep.
it didn't get full screen if you'll try again.
Oh, interesting.
Sorry, everyone. We did practice this before and it went full screen. We're just trying to see what's going on right now. David, did you try unsharing and resharing? Did you freeze, David? All right, technical difficulties. David's internet went out here. Jacob, you happen to have the slides handy, or you want me to pull them up and present them?
I'll make you the co-host if you want to pull them up. And
okay. Right. You guys see that now? Uh-oh. Looks like my access is still not approved yet. All right, guys, we might have to skip the demo until David's able to rejoin us here. Oh, there's David.
Hey, sorry about that. We actually had a little power outage, unfortunately. Can you give me access to share the screen again, Jacob?
yep, just made you the co-host.
Thank you, folks. Sorry about that blip. All right, I believe you should be able to see it now. Is that right?
Yes, we got it.
Okay, great. So here we are within the Chat GPT interface. At the top, you can see 3.5, which is the current free version, and GPT-4 on the right, which is the premium version that currently costs $20 per month. That price is sure to go up from here. But it does include a lot of really neat things, such as plugins. Now, the plugins that are available are varied. More of them are coming out all the time. Here's an example of some of the ones that I have installed here. So in this instance, Argo AI can create images on the fly. Diagram allows you to build dynamic charts and graphs from data that you input. Image Editor can manipulate images based on your prompts. And Prompt Perfect will take a very simple prompt and turn it into a detailed one that will result in better responses from ChatGPT. And Video Summary will do just that. It'll take a video that maybe you don't have time to watch, or is too long, or is filled with very specific information that you can't easily retain from a viewing, and it'll create a summary for you. So I'm going to demo some of these very quickly here. And notice that you can only have 3 of those enabled at any one time. So right now we have Video Summary, Prompt Perfect, and Image Editor enabled. And the first thing we'll do is we'll create a new chat with ChatGPT, and we'll ask it to use the Prompt Perfect plugin to generate a marketing email to promote my fictional company's upcoming 5th anniversary sale. So we're going to offer 5% off, and we sell woodworking machinery. This sale is going to go until September 24th. Now, you want to provide as much information as you can in these prompts. But something great about the plugin Prompt Perfect is that it will take a small prompt that's generated and it'll change it automatically to a more detailed one. For instance, this one is going to say, please ensure the email includes all relevant details such as the duration of the sale. It also adds additional adjectives and other things to prompt in order to get the best result out of ChatGPT. So it's a great tool to take your prompt and make it a little bit more advanced. So here's our email, subject line, dear name. We are thrilled to announce that we're celebrating our 5th year in business, providing top-notch woodworking machinery, some highlights of the sale, why choose us. So this generates basically something that like Mark said, maybe a marketing intern could come up with. But it's important to note that these things still require oversight, may require modifications, etc., before sending them out live to your customers. Still, it's a very helpful and great way to start the process. But let's say we don't like the subject line. So we want it to be a little bit shorter, and we don't want to say sale because that might get caught in a spam filter. So let's generate 10 alternative subject lines for this email. Keep them to less than 8 words, and don't include the word sale or discount that might affect the deliverability of that email. All right, so ChatGPT is going to immediately come up with 10 alternative subject lines for the email that adhere to the guidelines that I just put in there. Terrific. So what we're going to do from this point is we're going to create posts for a social campaign. So from that email, create social posts for the following channels: Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Now it's just that easy for it to come up with some great marketing material, or at least to start these posts for you. And so here's Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn posts that you can use or use as a guideline and edit with your brand strategy and messaging. But now that we have those posts generated, we want to include an image. So maybe I have one available like this one called 5th Anniversary, and it should work great, except it's not the right size necessarily for those individual social channels. So now I'm going to use the image editor plugin to crop that image to be used with the social channels, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, for separate posts. And so what I'll do is I'll just paste the URL for the 5th anniversary image right in this prompt. And then ChatGPT knows, based on the fact that I've enabled the image editor plugin previously, that it can use that new plugin to crop the images. So it's going to go ahead now and crop all those images individually based on the ratio that is best for those specific social channels. And it's going to send them back out to me now. So once it sends them back out to me, I can download those individual images and then create those social posts with the material that's correct for those individual social channels. So here's Facebook, and here's Instagram, which is a 916, and here's LinkedIn. And you can see the efficiency here. If you really go into a whole workflow, you can make things very quickly. Another demo we can show is the video summary. So here's a TEDx talk from Amy Dwyer about technology and humanity. And I'm interested in what she has to say, but I don't necessarily have time today to listen specifically to that video. Or let's say it was something on business tax law or anything you want to get the gist of without watching entirely. So I can go ahead and say, summarize this video for me, and then paste in the link to that YouTube video. Then the video summary plugin is going to activate, and since it knows how to access the transcripts from YouTube, it's going to go ahead and summarize the breakdown of the entire talk that she does, which is very cool. But something to note about all these large language models is that you can always iterate on these prompts and the results. You can always ask it additional questions, and you can always rephrase things that it comes up with. So in this case, I'm going to ask it to give me more detail on section number 8, because I'm interested in encouraging the next generation to pursue STEM fields. So if you ask it to give you more detail on that section specifically, then it's going to dive deeper into that specific area and give you a more detailed overview of exactly what she was talking about at that time. And this is a good thing to look at for any operation that you're running in these LLMs. You can always iterate, you can always ask for more, you can always break things down. Last thing I want to mention is just another example is about Google Bard, which is another large language model. It's not related to ChatGPT, and everyone is able to use Google Bard as well. Just Google it. Sometimes for different purposes, you may want to choose other models that are trained on different materials. And Google knows all about locations and the details of those locations and businesses and contact information. So let's say you have a sales trip in the Midwest and you happen to be going by Cincinnati. So if you want to stop by a few cabinet shops there and you don't already have a list generated, maybe you could say, I want to see 10 cabinet makers within 20 miles of the Cincinnati area. Of course I spelled Cincinnati wrong. And then Google will go ahead and generate a list of these folks along with some additional information. But if you were, for example, to ask ChatGPT that same question, then they would not have as good or as robust of an answer. All right, so now let's kick it over to Jeff Onsrud to talk about other business use cases. Jeff, you're still muted.
Thank you, David. Sorry about that. All right. Thanks, David. I appreciate you going through those demos. And I think that was a great way to show everybody that hasn't had much of a chance, or maybe somebody that played with it early on, really the capabilities that some of these large language models can, what they can do, especially when you start adding plugins and other things. And as David said, there's a lot of other tools we didn't have time to show you here. And which really brings up a point that I kind of want to start off with is, please, in the chat, share your favorite tools and use cases. We, at the end of this, we want to collaborate and discuss and share tips and tricks with each other. So, oh, if you can go back, David. There we go. So while you guys are putting stuff in the chat or in the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of Zoom, I'll keep going here. So beyond just those use cases that were shared earlier and the traditional manufacturing use cases that Mark shared earlier, there's a lot of other business use cases where especially as LLMs can be used. So traditionally there's been chatbots, but those chatbots had to be programmed where you basically had to put in very specific questions and answers and data types. And with this new wave of chatbots, which they also call messaging AI, is what these LLMs really are. So basically you can put in information like David explained, you can put in questions and it can give you true answers to your information. And it's more of a natural flow with a customer, as opposed to having to use keywords or having bubbled responses that have to be pre-mapped out. The biggest caveat there is it has to have a corpus of knowledge to pull from. So these things like ChatGPT are trained on the entire internet. So that's why you get these general capabilities to converse with. But if you want to use it inside of your business and provide customers answers to your questions, it's not going to necessarily know about your products, your services, and things like that. So the biggest thing there is if you feed it lots of documentation and information like that, then it can use that information and help your customers with that type of information. There are some caveats to that, which we'll get to in a second when we get to the security slide here. The other real big piece is research. Oh, sorry, David. So finding answers versus just searching. So oftentimes you might go to Google or Bing or whatever your preferred search engine is, and try to find an answer, and you might have to click through a bunch of links trying to find, actual information. What's great about using a service like ChatGPT or Bard or et cetera is that you can actually you can ask it something where it will give you just, here's the answer. It's searching through the internet, it's finding the answers, it's feeding it back to you in a concise format. Again, a few caveats to that we'll get to in a second. Then another way that it can be used is to get abstracts of long documents, kind of like the shortened version of the videos that David mentioned. You can feed in an entire PDF and say, what is this about? Give me that, the top couple points. You could ask it about, give me some points about a book that you might want to read that you don't have time for, et cetera. And it can really condense that information down. On the other hand, it can expand the document. So maybe you have a very skeletal, a little bit of information, and you want a much more thorough piece document. You can feed that piece in, and it will expand upon the information for you, helping in creating and researching documents. Excel formulas and coding help. Everybody maybe not everybody uses Excel, but you use Excel and maybe you're more of a, novice to intermediate, and there's, more complex formula you need. You can ask ChatGPT, hey, what's the formula for doing this? And give it the specific fields and the type of data in there, and it'll spit out the entire formula that you need back for you. Same thing applies to general coding, whether it's JavaScript, C++, etc. And kind of continuing on the document side of things, marketing materials, as David expanded upon, whether that's social media, emails, or actual full-on documents. So now we can continue on, David. So there are a few caveats here, though. It can be unpredictable. These models are known for hallucinations, or basically confidently stating a non-fact as a fact. It could tell you the world population is 257 people. You're like, oh, weird. It gets these biases, these hallucinations or biases by lots of times the feedback on the model, and the more you converse with it, it has trouble keeping up with its history. So maybe something you discussed 5 turns ago in the conversation, it may have forgotten already. And that's what oftentimes leads to inaccurate information. Sometimes it's just the fact of the sheer volume of data that it's training across. It gets some facts confused. So be careful, check your work. There's kind of a famous case going on right now where a lawyer actually had it make a brief for him for court, and he submitted the brief without actually doing the fact checks. It cited all these legal cases, and it sounded very plausible. And then he's about to get disbarred because he used, erroneous cases and presented them as fact. So do be careful of things like that. In addition, be careful about the exposing your data to these systems. Most of these systems have a clause in their privacy statement that basically says, hey, any data you input into here, we're allowed to use for our own training purposes. So now your data can become part of the training data. So that means that people might be able to access, if you put this information in, somebody else might be able to access your information via a query, maybe even by accident, by asking something similar, because this information is fed back into the systems. Another big concern is that if you actually hook these systems up to your system, then potentially there's a issue with hacking. So a large amount of your customer data can be exposed to this area, because that's how these systems work. They need huge amounts of data. So now if you're inputting your customer data, and then that system were to get hacked, whether that's OpenAI or one of these systems, now all of your user data that you input could be exposed. So whether that's account balances or just phone numbers or emails or whatever, you're potentially opening that up to a third party. So make sure you trust their data security models. And lastly, right now, this is not all settled in the court systems as far as intellectual property. So you might tell it, hey, generate me this great story that you post, a blog article, for instance, that you post up, and it essentially ripped it off from some other website. Or you might use one of these image generation tools, and it could look very similar to somebody else's work. And that is still up for litigation of whether that's possible or not. Humans often take inspiration from others, but there's a fine line between copying and original works. And right now, for instance, Sarah Silverman and some of the Writers Guild are suing OpenAI for this. Getty Images is suing OpenAI for using their images without the appropriate legal rights to use those, just even in the training data. So there are some caveats and some things to be careful as well to think about when using these tools, but not to all scare you. They can be huge time savers for a lot of things. So keep moving here, because I know we're low over time with that little power blip. So what is the future of AI in woodworking? Really here, we're going to punt a little bit in this fact, because we don't know. We can't know. It's kind of, ask again later, right? So the idea there is it's evolving literally week by week. As David mentioned, there's new models, there's new tools. A lot of the tools right now require coding and integrating systems, and they're hard, really. But then there's some tools that are, can provide value right away and can be plugged in. So in a month or in 6 months, these tools are going to continue to evolve and change. So it's really something that you just kind of have to look at every little bit and see where it takes us. But it'll be interesting in a year or so from now, maybe to revisit the topic and see what's changed. So with that being said, we want to open it up for questions and comments. We haven't gotten a lot in the Q&A just yet. So if you have those questions or comments, please put it in the Q&A, because that was what we intended. We wanted this to be an open discussion here. Or if you want to raise your hand, I believe we might be able to unmute you here. So if anybody has a question, go ahead and raise your hand or put it in the chat now.
Yep. I had a question posed to me earlier about how a company should behave in respect to these new technologies, specifically the large language models. And so just from my personal experience, what we're doing right now is coming up with our own internal guidelines and rules about how these things should be looked at with our employees. And how proactive or not proactive we're being with suggesting that they utilize them for their various functions. And I would suggest that every company takes a look at that, has a meeting and develops some guidelines, maybe restrictions when we're talking about things like copyrighted material, Jeff, et cetera. And I think it's going to be different for every individual business.
Absolutely. Great point, David. Thank you. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any raised hands at the moment, and I'm not seeing anything pop into the chat. So we might just go ahead and conclude here. I do want to make a quick plug. Also, hopefully everybody got that, saw that survey there on the QR code. So if you would fill in that survey and then make a quick plug for the Woodworking Industry Conference 2024 here, April 9th through 11th, 2024 in St. Petersburg, Florida. Scan that QR code again, and you can register for that event. Oh, wait, I've got one question before we wrap up here. All right.
Sure.
How hard is it to make a private or personal corpus of AI to access? Does XML work with ChatGPT? So you can, how hard is it to make a private or personal corpus? So at this stage, for the most part, it is tools that require coding. So if you have somebody that can write code, most of these models have APIs and they allow access. So in that regards, you can host whatever server or whatever you want your interface to be. But in most cases, you're going to be writing that interface, and then you're going to be connecting it to your data type. And then you're going to have to make API requests to these models that will then give you these answers. There are a few ready-made, chatbot services that kind of have pre-made connectors for some of the larger systems out there. And, the easy way to find those is just a quick Google search, or use one of these LLMs like ChatGPT to search for these, or Google Bard that has a little more access to current information. So they're very doable, but they're not, I don't want to fool you into thinking that, oh, just upload a bunch of documents and boom, you've got this and you set it up in a day. That's not the state we're at. A year from now, yeah, I'm sure there'll be 10 services that offer that kind of thing.
Yeah, and as we looked at the plugins that are available currently, there's a lot of them that are coming out all the time. And so just a cursory Google on XML for ChatGPT, there's some parsers that have been created, and there's a lot of discussion about it. And because ChatGPT can be used as an API for other applications, there are people that are building whole applications with that large language model, with GPT-3, with GPT-4, to be used for very specific functions like that.
And to that point with the XML piece, so inside of tools like VS Code, there's a whole different version of ChatGPT. So anybody that codes will know that basically you can turn these on and it can assist in longer format code versus just a pure question and answer. But certainly ChatGPT, you can put in, what's the XML code for whatever. XML is a little bit more of a language where you're defining your own tags typically. So, if there's not a defined language, more like HTML, then it's not going to be able to give as strong of an answer. But the other thing you can do is you can use it to reformat data. So let's say you have data that's, text and you want it to be tabular. It can take a bunch of data and turn text into a tabular format and essentially spit out an Excel file for you, or XML file in that case. All right, one more question popped in. How much more expensive do you think this service is going to become or for consumers or businesses, and how quickly will this increase take place? The models themselves are actually getting cheaper and cheaper. So OpenAI has continued to reduce their cost of their models, and they're trying to be more of a foundational principle where people are just going to make API calls, and they're going to make I'll call it a small tax, a few cents per query, really a few tenths of cents, I should say, per query. So those do tend to go down, especially as more and more of them are released, where typically where you start seeing the pricing going up is in the business tool. So it's the person that's actually taking the time to code the tool themselves, to make the user interface, to make the CRM integration or whatever it is. And a lot of those type of tools typically have some sort of monthly reoccurring cost, and may also have some sort of query limits or things like that.
Yeah, we talk about the privacy and data security that's involved with something that's public facing, and all that data goes back to the main servers for Bard or for ChatGPT to go into their corpus of knowledge, like you mentioned. So what I think will occur is that more companies will develop or kind of subcontract these private, more localized versions of the large language models to use internally, but those will obviously be more expensive. You'll have to have a way to host them, to interface with them, software licensing, et cetera. And so I think you're right that the $20 a month or whatever it is for premium access to do simple things like research or email marketing tools or logistic work, that's going to morph into more of a business tool that will certainly be more expensive. But it's impossible for us to give you the pricing model ahead of time.
Yeah, and one thing just to build on that, that you made me think of, David, is Microsoft, released their ChatGPT integration for Microsoft Suite Teams, Microsoft Teams, sorry, and it's an additional $30 or $35 per user per month. So I think that's about what the Teams cost, depending on your plan and features and stuff. Initially, 30 is kind of a normal, and then it's an additional 30 or 35 per user per seat. So that gives you a little bit of a scale of where we're at today. Any other questions before we wrap things up? I'll give it a couple seconds here. While any last questions pop in, I do again want to thank you all for attending. I want to thank David and Mark and the rest of the JTC team, and Jacob and Nikki as well for their help in putting this presentation together. And if you think of something after the fact, feel free to reach out to us. Please join the WMA, WMIA, and continue to interact.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
All right, I don't see any more questions. Thanks.
Thank you.